Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me for another Iron Age comic review, and today we are taking a look at previously on Clownfish TV. This is illustrated by Jian Wang, who is also selected, for lack of a better way to put it, the stories within. And he has, kind of arranged them, edited them. So I guess right off the bat, let's start by talking about the premise of this book. This is not a story per se. It is kind of an anthology, and illustrated very whimsically by Mr. Wong. I apologize, by the way, if I'm not pronouncing either part of your name correctly, Mr. Wong. But this is a selection of stories and anecdotes and jokes and situations that have been brought up on the Clownfish TV channel, which is hosted by Neon and Geeky Sparkles, the two big faces here on the cover, and occasionally feature their kids, Squid King and Pinky Boo. So, this is a very amusing and charming book, and the real question I had going into it is, how deeply invested do you have to be in the Clownfish TV YouTube channel to really get what's going on here? We're going to talk a lot about that as we go through this series of stories. And as you may be aware, if you've watched my channel for a while, I have reviewed a number of Clownfish Studios books. I have reviewed Parts 1 and 2 of Shadowbinders, and I also reviewed Crimson Wren of the True North. And I thought all of those books were good, they were charming, and I am familiar with Neon and Geeky Sparkle's work, all things considered. But I'm only passingly familiar with their YouTube channel. They do probably about 2 or 3 pop culture news videos per day, and I probably watch 1 or 2 of them per week. I can't say I have an exhaustive knowledge of their lore. They cover a lot of topics that I'm only tangentially interested in, and, a lot of the news is kind of repetitive. Anyone who spent any time following news in any sector is aware of the fact that there's only so much to say on a daily basis. And there's a lot of, going over it again and again for the people who only catch 1 or 2 videos a week, like myself. So I have no problem with their format or anything. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. And I was looking at this with the question, how much am I going to get out of this? How well is it going to sell? I believe this was for sale at the same time as Crimson Wren of the True North, and I chose not to invest at this time. So why do I have a copy now? Well, that's the next thing we need to talk about, partly because it's important to understand this review. I was provided this copy by Mr. Wong free of charge, and I think it's always important to disclose that kind of thing when you offer any kind of look at a product. Jian was interested in my feedback specifically to him as an artist, and I guess I'm kind of flattered by that. I don't know as I'm the best critic out there, but I am one of the few guys I think that's seriously trying to provide an even-handed look at independent projects, and he felt that he could benefit from my feedback. So that is a part of why I am looking at this book. And so you're going to probably hear a little bit more about that than you would in many of the other books I've looked at. While I do enjoy drawing, you can see my art table right back there. I really don't have a whole lot of, formal training. I just like doing it. And I like to study the art of other people to see what I can learn and take away from it. So we're going to talk a lot about Jian's illustration and probably some of the more nitty-gritty stuff, I think, than I would get into in a lot of books. But let's start with the beginning. What do you actually get here? Well, right off the bat, if you've seen my reviews of the other Clownfish Studios books, you know that this is not the way those other books come. This is a softcover. It is not a hardback, and it is going to look a little bit different on your shelf next to your other Clownfish Studio books. And that's probably okay, because this is a very different kind of book compared to those. The Bellatier books are all telling stories in a single world that have a pretty high degree of continuity, honestly. They all have Crimson Wren in them, for starters. This is telling a story in our world about very real people. And as such, I think it works, both to differentiate it and as a product. This is, I don't know how often I would pick this up and reread it to refresh myself on the story, for example. Most of these are vignettes that stand on their own, and when I was trying to tell somebody about one of them, I may pick this up off the shelf and flip it open. But I don't think when, if there is a second volume of this that comes out, that when I go to read that, I'll reread this to refresh my memory, which is what I often do for a lot of my other indie comics projects that I have an ongoing series of reviews for. So I think for what this is, it's going to hold up pretty well. It is very nice. It has, as you can see here, it has this slightly different interior paper stock as well. It's a little more matte. It's a little closer to newsprint. It's not newsprint, but it's not glossy in any way. And if you know me, you know I'm not a huge fan of glossy pages anyway, so I'm okay with that. But that is something to keep in mind about what you're getting from your actual physical product, which, again, I think is an important thing to talk about here. So all in all, it's a nice product, but it is going to be very different from your other Clownfish books, which I think is okay, given that it is very different from the other books that they've published so far. But if you're extremely fixated on that kind of thing, maybe give this one a pass and just stick to their, traditional stories. I don't see a reason to be fixated on that, but I know those people are out there. So you've been given a heads up. Let's talk about Jian's art. And as I said before, we're going to spend a little more time on this, and actually some aspects of it that I don't usually talk about either. So Jian has a very, very comic strip style, for lack of a better way. You can see it here. This is, very appealing. It kind of reminds me of a Disney comic or something like that. I do not say that in a prejudicial sense. I think that this is a really pleasing art style, especially if you have grown up and really enjoyed that kind of classic illustration. You can see maybe some sense of his paneling and whatnot here. This is a flashback to when Neon was a kid and he was, working to earn pocket money to supply his hobbies. And it gives you an idea of... here's another one. This was probably my favorite sequence in here, is this ongoing story about Squid King trying to make his own movie. It gives you a real sense of a scenario and what people are doing to try and achieve their goals. I like it a lot. There are some things that I think, there's actually a lot of things that I think could be done better in a book like this. Let's talk about a few of the basics. So the biggest thing I noticed here is outside of these more realistic pages, you can see like some Crimson Wren art here that Wong has redone in kind of his own style. At least I assume that's what that is. And outside of the occasional page like that, I feel like the characters could use a little more expression. Let's take a look at this page right here. You can see we have Geeky right there on the screen for most of those panels. And it's kind of hard to track mood changes and expression. The most expressive character on this page is right here. I'm not sure. That is Geeky's sister, I believe. And she just sort of has that nonplussed look with her eyes half-lidded. I would have liked to see a little bit more expression like that on the characters, especially around the eyes. While the characters do have eyebrows that are pretty expressive, and that is, kind of typical of this kind of art style, the eyes are, to quote John Wayne, when asked by one of his co-stars what the secret to acting was, he said, acting is all about the eyes. And when you're telling a story and you want your characters to emote, when you're telling that story visually anyway, the eyes are one of the best ways to sell the audience on what their mood is. Visually, in terms of illustration, the master of this, in my personal opinion, is Naoki Urasawa, who can just say so much about the mindset and feelings of his characters just by drawing their faces. But if you're really looking to master that kind of thing and get a sense of what the language of the human face is, I think it's really hard to beat the Hollywood actors of the 40s and 50s who had very expressive faces a lot of them came out of vaudeville, which was on stage, and you had to really over emote on stage in order to get the mood of your character across. So they had incredible command of their expressions and how they emoted. And while you're not going to translate all of that to this, and a simplistic, Calvin and Hobbes comic book art style, which is, again, one of my favorite artists, Phil Watterson, incredibly expressive art. It doesn't need to be that subtle. But a broader range of expression, especially around the eyes, I think would really help to sell a little bit more mood. And these stories are, they are very straightforward, and yet at the same time, I think a little more expressiveness would help sell the ideas, the feelings, and even there are some parts in here where there's a bit of subtext. You have characters who are disappointed, but not necessarily just because of what's happening right in front of them. I think a little more of that would have helped. A stronger command of facial expression, but especially around the eyes, because again, the eyes are the windows to the soul. We have these kind of sayings for a reason, and stronger emoting, I think, there would have been helpful. Now, there are a lot of gags in here that work explicitly because Neon is wearing glasses. Actually, one of the things I laughed the hardest at is there's a scene where he goes to take a shower, and you see him standing under the water with his glasses still on. So there's a lot of give and take in that. There are, whenever you're drawing something or doing any other kind of art, you have a ton of goals, and they are often in tension with each other, and there's a lot of push-pull that you have to work with. So that's, this is not a, you have to have a ton of subtle expression in every illustration. But I think for the obvious level up to take the visual storytelling here to the next level would be a little more expressive faces. The second thing I noticed, which is not actually art related, but is part of the trick of visual storytelling, is there are stories here that are kind of broken. The pagination is broken up weirdly. What do I mean by that? So pagination is basically a question of page turns and the like. So let me see. Here we go. So there is this 2-page story here where, and this is a very funny story. We have like these door-to-door Jehovah's Witnesses types coming along, and they're trying to get Neon and Geeky to take some of their literature. And in response, eventually, after they get frustrated just sending them away for a while, Neon and Geeky instead offer to swap books. The Jehovah's Witnesses take a comic book, and they'll take some of the Jehovah's Witnesses book, which persuades them to go away and never come back. That's funny. What's unfortunate about this is it's split onto facing sides of a page, so you cannot take in the whole story at a glance. I read the first page, I read the second page, I got to the punchline, I smiled, then I wanted to go back and look at it again and kind of just catch the whole flow of the joke now that I understood what was going on, and my brain wasn't trying to parse every step. Unfortunately, in order to do that, I had to turn the page back. There are plenty of jokes here which stand on a single page, and for the ones that go across 2 pages, it would be really nice if some of those single-page jokes were used to space them out so that we always got the 2-page jokes on facing pages, so that once a person has finished, that story, that sequence, they can jump right back to the beginning and look at it again. I know I'm the kind of person who does that. It's like, oh, okay, this is everything. Let me go back and run through it again real quick and make sure I haven't missed anything. Trying to figure out where everything is going. Once I know where everything is going, I can go through it again and maybe pick up on more of it. I like to do that. I know there are a lot of other people who like to do that as well. Having those kind of gags on facing pages is a really strong element of your visual storytelling. I know it's not something you think about right off the bat, especially, and I don't know if Jin comes from a background in webcomics, but this is something I've noticed especially in webcomic formats, because you just have the page on your website, then you click on it or the forward button or whatever, and you're on the next page. You don't think about how things are going to fall out in an actual physical item like this. I know this because I've tried to do comics and I've run into this problem. And, if you want to do a 2-page spread, you have to think about, oh, I'm sorry about that. Winter weather advisory around here. Anyway, I've had this problem come up, and it's important. It can cause problems. In this format, not a big problem. Obviously much bigger in something, more formal, like a manga or an actual comic book, where those 2-page spreads actually need to go side by side. But it's something that makes the story read better. It makes it stronger. It makes it flow better. And it keeps the audience from dropping out of the story to go back. The physical page turn is actually a really fascinating part of this medium, the comic book medium, as opposed to the webcomic or something like that. You can do things with the page turn. You can create audience engagement in ways you can't do in any other medium. One of the best examples of this, in my opinion, is the suspenseful page turn. And for some reason, he's going to come up a lot in this video, but Naoki Urasawa is a master of this. He will show you a situation which could go any number of ways, and then at the end of a page, he'll show you how someone is reacting to that situation. You won't know how the situation has played out. You'll just see someone reacting to it in horror, or in joy, or, in wrath. And then you have to turn the page to find out what actually happened. That's something you can only get in a physical comic book. I think it's really important. It's really powerful. And it lets the reader kind of set the pace of how they engage with a story. At the same time, having 2 pages side by side kind of can pull people across the page. If you go back to my review of Shadow of the Conqueror, I looked at some pages where Mike Miller did a really great job of that, leading your eye across the page with the way he laid out the art and the speech bubbles and this kind of thing. It's definitely more art than science. You have to develop a sense for it. It's done partly by feel and partly by just, kind of drawing a path out for yourself before you start laying down your actual panels and illustrations. But all of this is to say, a very, very visual way to tell stories is how you lay out your pages, not just in the paneling sense, but in what is around that page, what comes before it, what comes after it. And there are some very simple ways in this book. I think the pagination and the layouts could have served the stories a bit better. This is not a huge issue, but like I said, I'm trying to provide specifically art and visually based feedback for Gian because he provided me with this book, and that's what he was really hoping for. Another thing, speaking of leading the eye, there are some places where it felt like that was not as well thought as it could have been. There are some places where I think it's really good. Here is a pretty good example. You have this, we're recapping the Kevin Smith story, and I'm not going to get into that if you're not familiar with the Clownfish lore, but they had a weird thing going with Kevin Smith for a while. And there is a ton of text on this page, not all of which is important. And the way it's laid out is actually pretty good for helping you make your way through it, because the speech bubbles flow well, and they keep you kind of pointed back to the important parts of the story. And like these tweets, which are not very important, like all tweets are kind of like blue on a blue background in the little Twitter bird. And that does a kind of a good job of pushing that information to the background, because that's the less important information. So there's a lot of good stuff like that. There were other places. I'm gonna see if I can find it. There are no page numbers in this book. This is the return of my favorite hobby horse. Of course, this was published and finalized, I'm sure, long before I made that my personal windmill to tilt at. But there are no page numbers, so this will take us. Okay, here it is. I thought I was close to the end. There is a place here where I felt, in particular, the eye is deceived by the way things are laid out. So we have this string of word balloons that kind of just lead you straight down here. And then we have Geeky kind of pulling this panel aside, which is a clever idea. It's a clever way to play with a medium. But her pulling this aside kind of tells you maybe we loop back up like that. That's not how you're supposed to read this page. It actually reads from here to here to here. And, well, sort of. See, it's kind of hard even just looking at this page, knowing how I'm supposed to read it. So this is apparently Gian. He's here in the book. And I kind of like his occasional appearances in here. Actually, they're quite charming. But with the eyelid down here, Geeky then makes this aside. But this is the information about the Kevin Smith drama, which is referenced up here. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to read this, and it's very hard to get the whole picture of what's going on among those 4 panels. And what I would have really liked is a layout that led me naturally from here up to here, because that really feels like the most natural way to read this. And I'm not sure what the best way to adjust that would have been, but it doesn't feel like I'm naturally led through the story in that particular page. Again, this is super nitpicky. I think actually of all the visual issues I've pointed out, that's the biggest one in this book, per se. Just because I felt lost, and on most of these pages, I felt like the story flowed naturally from panel to panel. But in that particular place, I felt lost. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be looking at. I wasn't sure what the most important part to read was. I needed a little more help getting through those panels than I got. So that is something to watch out for. Really think about how the information you're putting on the page is being presented and how the audience is going to engage with it. The last thing I'll say about this is there are a lot of very fast-moving bits here. There are parts that are clearly... Like, there's this entire saga of how the family came together, how Neon and Geeky met, and the various things that happened to them as their family grew. And that's all pretty strong, I think, but there are parts where I felt a little bit lost. And this is where we're going to talk a little bit more about that whole, how much do you have to know Clownfish to enjoy this book? There are parts in here where we see flashback, especially in this sequence, but even in some other places. There are parts where we have these sequences with fewer or no words, where we just see people doing stuff with the occasional speech balloon. And it's hard to tell who some of these characters are, or what some of the events are, or where we are in people's lives. And I think we could have used a little more text on some of these pages just to help out with that. For example, we see both Neon and Geeky's parents in this manga, or in this comic, but we don't really get their names or any idea of what their relations are. I don't think we even see them addressed as mom or dad until, if at all, until at least halfway through the book. And that's a bit strange, especially considering Geeky's parents are apparently Amelia Earhart and Captain Kirk. Pretty neat. I didn't know that. But I kind of thought that's what they were, but I wanted to be sure. I was not 100% sure whether these were just people that they knew, or I guess in Neon's case, because we see him when he's young, working with people who even in that case, I'm not entirely sure whether those were his parents or his grandparents. I don't know a whole lot of this lore, and it would have been nice to either have like a Dramatis personnel page here where we could see who is who, with a brief word about who they are, or if there had been, maybe just a caption box next to them the first time they appear, or if there had been enough dialogue that we could put it together by context clues within the first page or two when they had shown up. That would have really helped me, because I was a little bit uncertain what was going on there for longer than I think I should have been in a really clear story. You can have characters who go unnamed if they're unimportant. Like, that's the whole point of an extra. But these are pretty important people to our central cast, and I think we should have had a better idea of who they are and what's going on there before we did. All in all, I think this is fairly accessible to a audience that is passingly familiar with Clownfish TV. I wouldn't recommend giving this to someone as saying, here, if you're curious about Clownfish TV, this is a great place to start. This is clearly written for people who know what the channel is and the basic premise, who are going to enjoy seeing these kind of humorous vignettes from the channel lore, so to speak, and the lives of the people behind the channel put to page. I think it's charming. Some of it is pretty funny, but mostly it's just charming. Neon and Geeky they're very charismatic hosts, and they have a lot to say. They put a lot of passion into it, and a lot of that carries over onto the page. I think Gian did a really good job capturing that part of the channel. So those are my thoughts. I think it's a good book. If you enjoy Clownfish TV, you would probably get a kick out of seeing the various hijinks they've talked about put to page. Some of the humor surrounding the Kevin Smith arc is pretty good. I like his depiction as like the looming anime villain there, and some of the shenanigans there are kind of fun to see. The timing is very hard in comics, and there is a whole joke revolving around sparkly shoes that I think is very funny and very well timed in the comic. I don't want to give too many of the jokes away because, once it's given away, it's a lot harder to laugh at it. But all in all, I think the book does what it sets out to do. If you are looking for a visual treasure trove of some of your favorite Clownfish TV moments, I think you will like this book. If you just have a passing familiarity and you want to get a better sense of the channel lore, I think this will get you part of the way there. I did not know that Squid King had tried to make a movie and apparently put a lot of effort into it, which is it's really quite impressive. All the different things he tried while he was trying to make his own movie. So that was pretty neat for me, someone who just has the passing familiarity with the channel, to get a sense of. And if you really are a completionist and you want to pick up everything, but you don't know if this is how this is going to fit in with everything else, I think this is a good companion piece to the world of Bellatir. Not so much because it says a whole lot about the forming of those stories, but it gives you a sense of the kind of people telling those stories. And I think that is important in its own way. It was a charming read. It was a fun read. I'd like to thank Gian for sending me a copy, and I hope he finds my feedback on his art and visual storytelling useful. I think he has a lot of potential to be to tell these kind of charming stories in the future, and hopefully he will continue to find ways to do that. I did enjoy reading this, so thank you very much. Those are my thoughts on the book. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.